Welcome in to the Gaming Discourse. I am Tyler Frater. Today I'm joined by a very special guest. She is the professor of graduate pedagogy, acting, and directing at VCU, Dr. Tawnya Pettiford-Wates. Hello, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
I'm
I'm
great.
well.
Lots of us, people listening, know you from Halo. You played Echo 419, Halo Combat Evolved specifically, but that's a small part of your career. You've had a long career of acting, of teaching. So what we're going to do today is we'll go through the beginning, we'll kind of work our way up to Halo, and then we'll get to more contemporary stuff as we close. So again, I just wanted to say thanks for joining me because you've been dealing with
Sure.
some stuff. So it's
At
nice
VCU, yes.
so it's nice that you took the time to I joked before, nice that you took the time to sit down with a nerd and and answer some questions. So my first question is just why you got into acting to begin with. I listened to a couple different interviews, read some stuff. I think you came from a military family, if that's correct.
Yeah.
And
Yes, I
and
did.
so and it seems like a lot of your brothers. I think you mentioned somewhere you had a brother or a sister in the military. Was that both?
Yes, I have two siblings. Well, one of them's retired from the military, but
Okay.
my brother's still he's talking about retiring, but he hasn't done it yet. Yes, and mainly a medical family. All of those people are my father, my sister, my brother. They're all doctors and dentists,
Okay.
and so nursing, medicine. So how I came to do what I do is I am out. I'm off the stream, off the
Yeah.
main path.
Yeah. So how did that where did that start? Where did your love for acting start, and where did you decide I'm gonna go this path?
Well, I think my mom says when I was born, but that I was drama from the beginning. But I do distinctly remember when I was probably about 5 or 6 years old, and I was in the Christmas play at church, and I was the Christmas angel, the one that says, "Behold, a child is born." That one, and I was so excited to get on stage. First of all, I loved being in costume. And I was so excited to get on stage that I kept jumping the gun. Like I kept coming in before it was time to say behold, like before he was even born. So so that was my, but I just loved like being, I think, out there on the stage. And then my parents decided that if I really loved it, that I should study it. They always said, you if you really want to do something, you better learn about it.
Hmm.
um, and make sure that you really want to do it. So I was in all the drama clubs and whatnot at through middle school, high school, all of that stuff. And then I went to start studying it very specifically. I graduated high school, went over to London and studied at the Central School of Drama, Speech, and Film. And that's when I fell in love with Shakespeare, because I never
Hmm.
understood it in high school, really, but the people over there created it. So they really know what it is. And when they do it, you can understand it. So then I decided, I ran into an actor over there who told me if I wanted to be an American actor, I should study in America,
Hmm.
because they would make me a British actor, and then they wouldn't give me all the rights and privileges because I'm not British. So
Oh, okay.
that it would be much better for me to study in America, and I could always come back to England if I wanted to. So that's what I did. And I started, I went to college to study theater. And when I graduated, I went to New York as a kind of graduation gift to myself with my boyfriend. And there was also someone from Carnegie Mellon who was on Broadway at that time. So I went to see her in a show called For Colored Girls Who Have
Yeah.
Considered Suicide. Yes, when
By
the rainbow is enough.
Antizaki Shange, correct?
That's right. She's the one who wrote it.
Yeah.
And so I saw that show, said I should be in it. My boyfriend gave me a dare to like call them up and say that I should be in the show. And when I called, I happened to call at the right moment because someone had just stepped away from the Broadway company and they were looking for somebody that they hadn't seen before. And they said, can you come down right now? Like, and I went down there, auditioned, and they gave me sides, called me back in to read for the director, and the rest is history. Instead of going back to Pittsburgh and doing the summer stock theater job that I had there, I came to New York and joined the Broadway company of For Colored Girls. And so, you know, being someone who acts on instinct can really, I mean, if I didn't take him up on that, I could have missed my opportunity to open up all these doors that show led me on. Yeah.
Yeah, that must have been I don't know, because it's almost like somebody getting right out of college and going straight to playing quarterback in the NFL or
I
something like
know.
that.
Yes.
You're going from, because that, and my knowledge of what constitutes like a big role, I don't,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not,
Yeah.
but I mean, Broadway is a pretty big deal, it seems to me. I did want to ask you a few questions about For Colored Girls, because
Yeah.
I when I looked up your career, I saw it, I looked into it more, and I was curious because it's technically Entezaki Shange, I think she coined the term choreo poem.
That's right.
Not
She did.
so it's not necessarily a play in that it has like a beginning, middle, end type thing. It's
That's
more of
right.
a various women sharing like desperate stories about life, all kinds of different stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it touches on some really heavy themes, some really
Yes.
personal themes, and I was just curious how that, if taking a role, if that being your first quote unquote big role out of college, how did that shape your career as an actor? Um, it's like, I don't know. How did it shape your career as an actor?
That's a great question. And let me just say this too. Your knowledge of For Colored Girls just now, how you talked about it, not very many people that I have met do that. So kudos to you for recognizing and understanding it, what it is. It's not the regular play.
Sure.
It's not the regular play, which is why she had to call it, coin that term, choreo poem. And it completely changed my life. It completely, being in that play, I was the baby at that point. I was just coming out of college, and the women who were in it, who I was joining, were like Broadway veterans and, theater. I mean, they were older
Yeah. Wow.
women. And so they sort of took me under their wing. And I always say that my journey through that process was kind of like graduate school on steroids. Like it was, you know, it is very akin to coming right out of college and being thrown into the NFL. Like, and particularly for those guys that have to start as the starting quarterback, like
Sure.
boom, like it's a whole nother, ball game. But it changed because it's such a personal piece, because you have to get on stage basically and be authentically yourself. Like you're not really hiding behind some character or putting on any mask or anything like that. It it called me into a different place in my knowledge of what acting was and what I wanted to do as an actor. After I came off of that, first of all, I did the show for like 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a gig, like a high paying job as an actor for 3 years. I was even able to save enough money that if I wanted to, I could have bought a house at the end. Do you know?
Oh
I mean,
wow. Okay.
yeah. And so, in fact, I wanted to buy a house in Park Slope, but my father talked me out of it. I'll never forgive him for that because I could be a millionaire right now.
Sure.
But anyway, it just, I couldn't, so I no longer wanted to do commercial theater.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't just, I mean, unless of course it was a commercial, like doing commercials or doing film or doing television where you don't, you get paid right away and you get paid much more money than you would in the theater. The theater is what I loved. The theater didn't make the same kind of money as you make in film or television. Even my voiceover career, like I love doing voiceovers because you come into the studio and you do your thing and that's it. then you're done. And, I mean, and they pay you. And if there's any royalties involved, if it's something that's going to be running, you continue to get paid. And so I realized that theater required a lot of time and energy and effort. Um, and I still wanted to do that, but I had to get something to support that. I had to
Sure. Yeah.
do something that would help to support that, because I couldn't just do any kind of theater. Like I had now, after this experience, I wanted to do theater that actually said something, that moved people, that had a social justice kind of bent to it, that challenged how people thought about things, that created controversy, all of that didn't just do the norm of entertaining people. Like I thought that's what I wanted to do, just entertain people, but then I found out, no, that's not what I want to do. So that's, it completely changed my life.
I am curious. I know absolutely nothing about acting. Never.
Mm-hmm.
The last time I acted was probably a church play 20 years ago, something like that.
Yeah.
But I am curious for somebody that doesn't know anything about acting, what the differences are between like a voiceover and acting on
Ah.
stage. There are the obvious differences where when you're on stage, your whole body's there. So I assume you're not just, you got to do a bunch of stuff. You can't just,
Mm-hmm.
say the line. But is there
Mm-hmm.
anything deeper than that? Are there more nuances there?
Um, yes, because when you're on stage, you literally have to become the character I mean, the people are seeing the story of whoever it is through your interpretation of that. Um, uh, you cannot hold a script. No, it has to, so you have
Yeah.
to, I mean, there's a long rehearsal process,
Yeah.
right? The thing I love about voiceover is that, yes, you are creating characters. Um, you have to be very connected to your impulse when you're doing voiceover work, because voiceover work is quick, it's quick work. You have to make quick choices, quick decisions, and then you get notes. Like I'm not adverse to someone when I'm in the studio creating a character. I want notes. Like, let me know what it is that that you
Mm-hmm.
need from this character. Let me know, give me some adjectives, give me some, something that I can take and run with. And do you want me to go faster? Do you want my voice to be pitched higher? It's very much more technical, and I involve my body because that's the kind of actor I am, but nobody ever sees it. They hear it through my voice. They hear it with how my voice translates
Sure.
onto the tape. So I love that I can show up anyway. I don't have to like for commercial work, you have to go through makeup and hair and all of that. And you do have to know the lines. You don't get to hold the script. I love that I get to read when I do voiceovers. I'm just reading the script. And oftentimes it can be a little lonely, because you're the only voice that's, even though you might be talking to somebody and even though there might be other
Yeah.
characters, how they construct that is for them to do, and you just have to use your imagination, as if somebody has to explain to you who you're talking to and why you're saying these things, and then you take it from there. So I appreciate that because it lets me kind of improvise and kind of exercise my imagination and my impulse muscle.
Mm. I
Does
always
that make
imagine
sense?
it does, and I've
Yeah.
always imagined one of the challenge. And I, again, zero experience acting, but I always imagined one of the challenges with voiceovers, and especially in video games, because there are tons of famous characters and some voice actors, they don't like the term voice actor; they just want to be called an actor, which I understand. But I've
Mhm.
always thought one of the challenges is that you don't always have like another actor to read
Yeah.
emotions off of. You
Yeah.
have to. It's an audio file that a director is going to put together, or like an
Yep.
engineer, but you don't
Yep.
get to see that other person. So in like
Yeah.
really tight moments of emotion and stuff like that, they have to imagine it, have two actors do it, and then put it together. And I think there are probably some times when actors are maybe together in certain circumstances. I don't know, but
Sometimes there are, and I love those times because because I am a stage actor at heart. I love to be able to play off of someone. That's the optimum. But I know that when I go in the studio and they're directing me and giving me, input as to who I'm talking to, what the circumstances, etc., that I just have to make choices. And sometimes they go, that was great. And I go, okay, let me do it again. And let me try something else. Like maybe if that's the right direction, then let me keep going. And having the ability to do that on the spot and have them collect like a bunch of different interpretations. Sure. You never know how it's going to turn out. That's someone else's job to do. But I just always want to be able to give the client what they're looking for and more. And so that's very, very rewarding for me.
Later on in your career, you had a small part in Twin Peaks.
Yes.
So I mentioned to you before the show that I'm a nerd. I'm also a Twin Peaks fan. But I was curious, since we were talking about directing, because that was David Lynch, Twin Peaks' very famous murder mystery show.
Yes.
I don't have too many questions except for what was that experience like? What do you remember from it? I think I read somewhere that because you were in a hospital scene, there was a dead body, and the dead body was, you thought it was like a prop, but it was a
dummy.
person.
I did. I thought it was a dummy because she was laying there so still. I was in there to practice my medical stuff, like how do you take a pulse? How do you, looking at the IV, adjusting that. I was just in there to sort of make myself comfortable with the stuff, the props, and just thought she was another prop. And, and then I was doing something. I even was saying some lines, and then all of a sudden her head turns to me, her eyes open, and she goes, that was great. And I just screamed she just freaked me out. And all the people came running, the people on the and we all had a big laugh about it. It's like, oh my God, I did not know this was a live person laying here. Because she looked dead. The makeup that they had on her, like, blue lips, and she just looked.
If there's one thing Twin Peaks did well, which I think it did a lot of stuff well, it was making creepy makeup and dead bodies and stuff.
Very creepy.
Very creepy show. So did you get to work with David Lynch at all? Did he direct you on those?
I did. And
you did?
The thing
okay.
is, when they first asked me to audition, my agent, they came to Seattle and they were just doing calls, right? For people. And my agent, said, and I was doing a commercial when I got the call for Northwest Airlines, that the commercial where they were going to stop smoking on planes. So wow. You might be so young you don't remember that at all. But there was a time when there was a smoking section on the plane,
Okay.
Anyway, Northwest Airlines was the first company to get rid of that on the plane. And I was in this commercial where and RJ Reynolds was the client. And the thing is, they also represent tobacco. Right.
Oh, weird.
So it became this big story. It became this big story in the New York Times, and somebody got fired on that one.
Oh no.
But anyway, while we were doing it, the person who was doing the lighting worked with David Lynch, and I got the call and I said to the person that's sitting next, I'm going to be auditioning for David Lynch. And I didn't know who David Lynch was at that. I was not a David Lynch person.
Yeah, sure.
And they said, you don't know David Lynch, and I was like, no. And I said, they went, you don't know, is it Blue Velvet? Yeah, that he did, I think, Blue Velvet. And he goes, that guy, and they're pointing to the guy who's doing the lights. That guy did the lighting and won an Oscar for for Blue Velvet. I was like, oh my God, really? Okay. So, and they were like, oh my God, you're so lucky. And so I go for the audition. David Lynch is there at the audition. So that doesn't usually happen either, by the way. Stuff is usually done through a casting agent or a casting director. And then if it's a speaking role, sometime, or depending upon how big the role is, you'll go, the casting director will bring you in for the director, right? But they were casting the girl that dies, Laura, whatever.
Bailey, yeah.
Yes, they were casting her, and they were casting some of the supporting roles, and I was one of the supporting roles. And they were asking us about how we felt about nudity or something, like on the sheet, on the check-in sheet. And I was like, I don't think that's I don't think they got me here for that, right? They're going, oh, no, you're not here for that. And here are the sides, and they gave me some sides to look at, so, lines to look over. And they call me in, and David Lynch is in there, and he's got his classic baseball cap on, and he's just kind of very down dressed, very like regular looking person. You would have never thought this is like this big time director. And I go, okay, where do you want me to stand, or where do you want? He goes, just put that down, And so the sides, I put them down. He goes, just have a seat. Let's have a talk. So we just talked. He asked me who I was and what I did and blah, 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 blah. And then he ended up casting me. It's like, it was the weirdest audition that I had ever had. It was like an interview for a job instead of an audition. And then when we got into the actual rehearsing for the scene that they were going to shoot, he allowed me to do the scene, because I was also working with Kyle MacLachlan and Michael. They were both in the scene too.
Yeah.
And he let us do it as if it were theater. He goes, she's theater, she can do this, right? And so we did it, the whole thing, and they shot it, the big shot. He goes, okay, now we're going to do it MOS. That's without sound. Without sound. That's how he did it. Like, just think of it that way. And he literally directed me as if I were a puppet. Like it was like paint by numbers. It was like he would say, okay, now look to your right. And then he'd say, now look up a little. And then he'd say, okay, now look at your watch. And then he'd say, now pick up her right hand. Like, literally, he was giving me things to do. And I did not get it. That was so strange. I had never been directed that way before. And I didn't get it until I actually saw the scene on tape. Like, he wanted all these things that he could put to construct the scene the way he wanted to construct it. And he used the overall shot, the full scene to sort of do that. And he put the puzzle pieces together. But I said, now, I have never been directed that way. And I wonder if he had just told me like what he wanted, if he had said some things, if I couldn't have given him the same type of performance. I don't know. I don't know if he could explain what it was that he what he was looking for. Maybe he didn't even know what he was looking for. And he just knew things that he wanted to construct the scene with. So I have never been directed like that again. So that was a very, very unique experience.
Okay. So we'll talk about the Halo now.
Okay.
This is the thing. So I have a few questions, and we'll get into your experience. Do you play video games at all? Do you?
Not at all.
Nothing. Okay. I just curious. You never know.
Yes. Yes.
How much do you know about Halo? Are you aware of its legacy?
Well, I know
its history?
about there's been many iterations now, and I even did a reboot of my character
and the podcast. Yeah.
Yes. And I've done some interviews like this from people who are Halo, they are disciples. And I remember when I was doing a voiceover for the reboot online, the guys were like, two of them, they looked like little kids when I was talking. And even just recently, I did not Halo, but the guy who was recording me was going to use it in an album. And he does real kind of space agey
interesting.
kind of, and he was going to use my voice. He liked my character in Halo,
Sure.
and he wanted that type of character. He didn't want me to do faux hammer for him, but he was like, I'm just getting excited hearing you talk. Because he's a nerd. He's a Halo nerd,
Sure. Yeah.
So I told the guys when I got the part and I came up there, and of course I recorded it just myself. I was the only one in the studio recording. And I walked up on the floor, this was years ago too. And I realized, first of all, there was only one woman up there on that floor. And she was the receptionist. And then I noticed that because Microsoft bought Halo. They moved the entire thing from Chicago to Seattle, right? And then the next thing I noticed was I was the oldest person on the floor. Like there were all these like really these engineers playing these games everywhere that are millionaires, these young kids that are millionaires playing these games everywhere. And I told the guy, I said, I don't play video games. I know nothing, but I love characters and character voices. So, he's like, that's why you're here. Right. So he explained to me what was going on. And then we did it like, several takes, and it was fun. And then I realized that I became a hero to like my son's 8th grade. All the 8th grade boys all of a sudden loved me.
Yeah.
So, and I still have students today who get knocked out when they find out that I was the voice of Fulham. And they tell me that I should go to some of these conferences, conventions that they have. There would be people lined up at your table if you went to that, so. But that's the extent of what my son played, and he played all over the world. Like he, I guess everybody can play from wherever they are.
Yeah.
And he played Halo a lot. And my students played, and it just trips us out when we hear you on that game. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Halo was a big moment for Microsoft because they were, the Xbox was Microsoft's first push into the console space. So with consoles, with video game consoles, and I'm assuming this is true for the Xbox, for most video game consoles, companies will sell the console at a loss and you make it up on the back end with games. So you're not making money on the console, you're making money on the games. So the big thing is to put out these games that are really popular, really famous. The term is killer app, brings people to get the console, but Halo was that for the Xbox. It was this game that was going to shift the paradigm. Xbox was coming out, or Microsoft was coming out swinging for the Xbox. So that's why Halo is if somebody does a history of video games, Halo is a big part of video game history because of where it is within Microsoft's entry into the console space. But yeah, Echo 419 is just this. Unfortunately she died. Spoilers.
I know.
She dies.
I was like, why do I die?
she dies at the end of the first Halo. There are still fans out there that pretend that, oh no, she's alive somewhere. She's out in space flying around. The Master Chief just hasn't found her yet. She'll be okay. But yeah, you gave just a couple amazing lines, because Halo is full of these little moments. Bungie did this great job where they wrote these characters, had these fun little interactions. But Faux Hammer was just this cool pilot that was always, as cool as an ice cube, never got rattled kind of a thing. And there's a specific level where you come in and you say, our motto, we deliver, and you drop a warthog, which is like and if I go up to any of my friends and I say, our motto, they'll say, we deliver.
We deliver.
So I was going to ask you, like, do people ever come up to you and like ask you about Halo? I guess you've answered that now, because apparently
They do. They
do you ever
do.
have students come up and be like, can you say this line for me? I'm sorry. Do you ever
Yes.
have that? Oh no.
And I go, how much money do you have? No.
Right. You don't work for free. That's right. That's right. Well, that's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah.
It
And
was
then yeah.
fun though. It was fun. It was a lot of fun doing it. And even though I'm not a player, even my little 4-year-old, I have a grandson who's 4, and he likes video games, and he'll, on his phone, and he'll come up and say, and they call me Go, can you help me? And I'm like, I Ezra, I cannot help you. I do not I cannot help you. You have to wait till your brother comes home. Yeah. Yeah. Even today, I still don't play video games.
And so was that because you were working at Seattle Central at the time, I think, correct?
Yes. Yes.
And so did you just get a call from your agent and they were like, "Hey, there's a casting call for a game. It's a quick read," and that's
Yes.
kind of
That's exactly what happened. I'm trying to think because I don't remember auditioning at
Oh,
all.
okay.
I just remember getting the call. So I'm thinking that they must have listened to some reels. I had a voiceover reel. So
Mm-hmm.
they must have listened and chose me that way. Uh, that's the call. So the call was, you're booked for a voiceover, right? And it's a gaming, it's a blah, blah, blah. And then they told me a little bit about the history of how Microsoft, picked up Halo. What was it? Was that the company? What
So
was the
Bungie,
Bungie? Yeah.
Bungie was the developer of the game. Microsoft
Yeah.
published it, and at the time I don't remember if they may have owned, but I don't remember exactly. I'm
I
sure
just
there will be
remember
people screaming at me if they
coming in.
listen.
I remember coming over to Microsoft, which I had been to many times because I did a
Okay.
lot. That's why Microsoft I had done a lot of work for them.
Okay.
Other things in the company, industrial work for them. So they knew me. So that might have been the way that, they hooked me into this Halo thing. And they gave Halo. So I had been over there many times, and they sent me to a floor that I had never been on before. And on that floor, it was all Halo, right? And
Okay.
it had these like huge, it was huge cardboard cutouts of the characters and stuff, and it had huge gumball machines, and it felt like a toy world.
Yeah.
And I just remember that it was it was a very different feeling
Sure.
at Microsoft coming
Yeah.
onto that floor as compared to the other places where I had done stuff for them. Because they had a studio where they would record not only voices, but they actually physically
mocap.
recorded me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a very different place. Yeah.
Yeah, well, video games have come a long way, especially with the technology and the writing. It would be interesting to see some of your reactions to some of the because some of the performances today in video, because now with motion capture, with more robust writing, there are some characters in games that are just so incredibly fleshed out, and they spend so much time talking. It would be interesting to see, to hear about that from an expert's perspective, I guess, from someone that knows acting really
Yeah.
well.
I can tell you that I have come up upon my grandson, who's 16, playing video games and thinking that he was watching a movie. I mean, like I would look at it for a few seconds and think, is that or those he does a lot of Madden, the sports things,
Yeah, sure.
the sport, yeah. And I'm thinking, are they playing now? Are they, I need to go downstairs and turn on the TV if they're playing now. And he goes, no, this is a video game. I'm like, wow, it has come a long way.
Yeah.
It's
Yep.
it's very realistic.
Yeah.
Film-like. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. And I'm glad you're recognized. I was going to be sad if Echo 419 Fohammer went all these years and just nobody knew. I would be sad. So I'm glad you deserve to be recognized for that.
Thank you.
Obviously, and your Broadway stuff, which is more potent, but for nerds like us, I'm happy about that. Okay, so moving on from that, I did want to ask you some questions about the Conciliation Project,
Okay.
which is something you started, I think, in the late '90s.
Well, it was bubbling in the late 90s, but it really became something in 2001.
Okay,
In
and that was you were
2001.
still at
Yeah.
Seattle Central, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so can you give me a description? I'd probably be better coming from you. What the Conciliation Project, what the goals of the
Yeah.
project are, and then how you guys achieve those goals.
Okay. So the mission of the Conciliation Project, first of all, I need to say, because a lot of people know what reconciliation is, and they always try to say the Reconciliation Project, and we are purposely not the Reconciliation Project, because you can't reconcile something that you have not first conciled. And so the mission of the project is to promote through active and challenging dramatic work, open and honest dialogue about race, racism, and systems of oppression in America in order to repair their damaging legacy. So that's like what the goal was, and our values are, about radical transparency, about truth telling in history, about restorative justice, about uh, reconciling forces that are oppositional to one another, trying to bring those forces closer together. Um, and to do it in a way that humanizes all the constituents involved, everybody involved. One of the ways that we get into war is by dehumanizing the other, by putting characteristics and nature that feel very antithetical to who we are on something else or someone else, whether it's how the people think, whether it's what they believe in, whether it's who they love, whether it's, whatever that is opposed to our values. And so we attempt to through dialogue and through artistic expression of not only performing art, but also like visual art too. And we attempt to like illuminate for people someone else's point of view so that we can humanize them, so that they don't have to be our enemy. We can disagree and we can also live together,
So why do
basically.
you think? So that's a big project. That's very,
Mhm.
I assume, very complicated. I assume also very challenging.
Yes,
Why do you think theater, or how is theater a good vessel for facilitating that kind of discussion?
because theater is at its essence storytelling. And all of us have stories to tell, all of us. And theater is a way where James Baldwin, who is one of my mentors, he says a story is impelled by the necessity to reveal itself, and that a story can have nothing to hide, at least not intentionally, and that um, there doesn't have to be a resolution to the story, that the aim of the story is revelation in what we make of the questions with which the story leaves us. So I love that. And I think that is the potency of theater, that there is a power there's a transformational power in the stories that we tell about our own humanity, about our own challenges, about our own problems, about our own, that people begin to see some universal value in that. They begin to see themselves in something that someone else has experienced or is experiencing. And it's very difficult that once you see that in someone, that you can kill them or hate them or what, once you see yourself in someone else, or you'd be hating yourself, basically. And so I think that is the power of theater that is different than film, or different than television, because you are seeing actual three-dimensional people. You're seeing flesh and blood. You're seeing tears and sweat and, right there in front of you. And it's very, unless you're a sociopathic personality, you can't help but have some sort of empathy, some sort of feeling, some sort of connection with that other person.
I am curious, because For Colored Girls does not have it ends, obviously it's not endless, but the stories themselves I tried to find as much of it as I could. I watched
you didn't watch Tyler Perry's, did you?
No, I didn't. No, not that one. Not that one. It was the one made in the 80s, maybe. I think it was a TV movie. That was the only production I could find that it was like nonstop. It was the whole thing, but it didn't have
Resolve.
endings. It was just, here are people and their experiences,
right?
And then it just left. And I thought, so is there a connection between that and because you mentioned what you're doing is that there's no resolution, it's just sort of unpacking questions.
Right, because when in James Baldwin, like the rest of that quote goes on to says, so there's no resolution to a story. The aim of the story is revelation in what we make of the questions with which the story leaves us. And then he goes on to say, plot, on the other hand, answers all questions it pretends to pose. And so then I always say to my students, what is a pretend question? And, the answer is that it's a question you already know the answer to. That's not, it's kind of like attorneys are always taught, never ask a question that you don't already know the answer to, right? In court, like never ask something on the stand that you don't already know what the response is going to be. Well, that's not a real question. That's a plot. I'm plotting to get you to say what I need you to say. Right. I already know what I want you to say. Now I need to string out the question in a way that will make you say that. And there's no revelation in that. There's no learning in that. There's, I already knew. So what am I learning? So this idea is what are the questions that come up for you when you get this information? That takes you deeper into the actual interrogation of something. Like, why do I believe what I believe? Why do I think these things? Why did I, why was that my response? Why, and that brings you closer, I think, to real knowledge and illumination.
There's a movie critic on YouTube, Daniel. He does a lot of other stuff. And I cite him because he was the first person to say something like this and bring it to my head. But he was talking about the movie Annihilation. I'm not sure if you've heard of it or seen it. But it's a really weird, strange horror movie, but it has kind of an ambiguous ending. And he said ambiguous endings are often there because they want you to look back on what you may have thought about over the course of the movie, rather than it sort of putting a bow on it and going, okay, now it's over. It's ambiguous because it's not going to give you that resolution. Now it's about looking back, which I thought was just interesting. So you started the Conciliation project in Seattle.
Yes, and that was a mistake. I mean, it's not like we started out it's not like that was the intention to start a company. We were doing a project for a class.
Oh yeah,
and,
sure. Okay.
Yeah, and then it snowballed into something that was extremely effective in getting people to talk about very difficult topics, and that's how the Conciliation project came to be.
So I have sort of two questions here. One, I was going to ask, how do you think it helps people? Do you think what kind of impact does it have on people? And then two, you took it from Seattle to Richmond, Virginia. And those are two very different places.
Yes,
with two very different histories. Richmond, Virginia, for a point in the 1860s, was the capital of the Confederacy. And
that's
you're
right.
talking about race. And
I
I just
know.
thought that's interesting. So question one, has it been effective in your mind? How do
Mhm.
people react to it? And then question two, did things change? Did the reaction change going from those two different places? And how did they
That's
change?
that's really interesting. First of all, um, the Conciliation Project has been a nonprofit 501(c)(3) since 2001. So that should tell you we are still here. So it's now 2024, and we are still here and working. In fact, this year, uh, we just came back in, I guess it was March. Yeah, March. We just came back from the National Education Association conference that they held in Las Vegas. We had been there 2 years in a row. The year before, they held it in Seattle. So that was kind of like a revisit, the Conciliation Project coming back to Seattle after all this time. But so yes, it has been very, very effective. When COVID hit, we totally went online, and we began to do workshops, and because of just before COVID, when we had the whole social political uprising around the George Floyd murder and so forth, everybody was looking for some way to talk. Everybody was like searching for, how do we unpack this? How do we bring it up? And so we were there, like, to step into that void and help facilitate people. And we did organizations, we did businesses, we did schools, we did clubs, we did all kinds of facilitation around issues around race, and our country and our country's history. So I would have never thought to do it online, but the pandemic made that happen. And so, now we've got a whole online presence with workshops and conversations and that sort of thing. When we were in Seattle and the company was born there, um, and we did a show. Our sort of launching point, or our signature piece, is called Uncle Tom Deconstructed. That was the piece that was being done in a classroom setting, and that's the piece that launched the project. I said, just flippantly, just like off the top of my head, I went, now it would be very interesting if we, there's all this liberalism in the Pacific Northwest. It'd be very interesting to take this to the South, where this country began, and see what the impact. And then I let it go. It's like, that'd be very interesting to do. But we're here and we're doing this. But I also have to put a pin in that for a second and say, sometimes when people think they're liberal, when they think they're progressive, when they think they don't have those problems, those are the people that it's the most important to deal with their own privilege and their own assumptions and their own positions about where they stand. So yes, it was a progressive time and place where the Conciliation Project was born, but that didn't diminish the amount of work that had to be done around discussing those issues. When we came to Richmond because I took a job at VCU. And I was content to leave the company in Seattle and have myself just come back on occasion and visit in Seattle. But when I came to Richmond, they all remembered what I said about that the company should, like, see whether we could do the South. And a whole bunch of them decided to move to Richmond.
Oh no.
And
That's
so
awesome.
that's how the company moved with me when I moved over here to start teaching at VCU. And it was quite different because, at least in the Pacific Northwest, they were open to the dialogue. Like, they were open to having the conversation. Over in Richmond, in what historically is the heart of the Confederacy, it's that Southern politeness thing where behind the mask of how you doing, bless your heart, da da da, there's stuff that they don't want to let out because it's not, we don't talk about those things in polite company, right? You don't talk about religion, you don't talk about politics, and you don't talk about race. So we politely tolerate each other, and we don't, so when we came and we were like, tear the, just tear it all open and let's talk about it. It was not the young people loved it. The young people loved it. The older people, the ones who like can support it with the money, those are the people that we had to convince, that we had to slowly sort of bring them on board. And the young people are the people that actually made the company exist and thrive over in Richmond. If they hadn't come en masse like that and just said, we're going to do this here, I'm not sure. I definitely couldn't have done it by myself.
In a couple, I don't remember where specifically, but I think I remember you're reading somewhere, or maybe it was in another podcast. You had this sentiment that sometimes people are afraid to talk about those things because they don't know what words to say, or they don't know what the correct thing is to say. And and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed like your perspective was just go ahead and say what you want to say, and we'll sort of figure it out afterward. But the most important thing is let's just get talking. Is that correct?
Yes, we live in a culture like right now. What is the thing that they say? They say canceled, right? Canceled. Like people say one thing and they're canceled. That wasn't the term back then, but the idea that you're too afraid, that you're so politically correct, that you want to be politically correct, that you have questions, you have concerns, but you don't want to say them because you're afraid of how they might come out and you're afraid of who you might offend. And around race in particular, for all people, I think there's a lot of guilt and shame around it. For people who are considered the dominant class or the colonizers, that class of people, there's a lot of people who want to deny their connection with that, like that's part of their legacy, that's part of their history. For people who are the oppressed, there's a lot of guilt and shame around that as well, around first of all, being enslaved, being forced and being oppressed, and feeling like somehow there was weakness in that. So guilt and shame, and I always say that guilt and shame are the bookends of oppression. And bookends are designed to keep things status quo, to keep it where it is. And unless we are willing to have the courage to step away from that guilt and step away from that shame, we will always be the victims of oppression. And when I say oppression, I'm not only talking about the historically oppressed classes of people, because I believe the oppressor is also oppressed. That when you are in that cycle, it's a both and situation. And so the goal of the work is let's get liberated. Let's all get liberated from oppression, so that oppressors don't feel the need to oppress, and the people who are the victims of that, or the subjects of that, don't feel the need to have to take that on as well. So let's all get liberated and try to find some equality and equity and justice and freedom from the things that we have inherited. All of us have inherited things. So first of all, let's learn about it. honestly learn about it. And then let's work together to dismantle it
Yeah.
so that we can all move forward together, because we're all in the same boat.
And over the years, have people, has it changed people's minds? Do people come up and are like, oh, it was tough to get through, but it feels better that I'm through it, like a long jog or something. It was tough, but I'm glad that I did it, kind of a thing. Is that sort of the reaction?
All the time. It happens all the time. You know, we were reading through some of the comments of the conference that we just did, where we went and we did 3 days of workshops. One day it was all day, the next day it was half a day, and the third day it was like a few hours in the morning. So we called it scene 1, scene 2, and scene 3. And we used scenes from our work so that people could talk to the scenes and talk about the scenes, right? So that then once we got them talking like that, then we could have them start talking to each other and start sharing with each other. And I mean, almost 100%, like there's always people who go, you know, so, but like 95%, our comments were all excellent about how this changed, how this gave them some tools in order to open up these conversations where they live, where they work, how it was a great way to approach a very difficult topic, et cetera, et cetera. I think that whenever we do our plays, because we deal with all the color groups of people, we deal all, you know, so it's all the color groups. The last play that we created was called Whitesplaining. And so that was about the white folks. So, you know, we got the black folks, the red folks, the yellow folks, the brown folks, the white folks. We got them all the folks. And people were just like, the kind of objective of that play was to hold a mirror up so that people could see themselves, hopefully see themselves and want to change, and then strategize about what things they can do to change, like to change themselves, to change, the work has to start individually and then start to spread into the community. And you know, so many people always go, I never thought of it that way before, right? And a lot of times people are so overwhelmed by the problem or the situation that they just don't know where to start. You know, it's like, I want to do something, but I just don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. I don't know what. So our work is hopefully giving people tools, giving people a way in, like your own story is a way in to the conversation. And just talking is a beginning. It's not the end all be all. We got to do more than talk, but at least it's a beginning, right?
Yeah.
It's a beginning.
And when I reached out to you, I told you that I was obviously interested in the Halo and the nerd stuff, but your career spans a lot of different things. So I didn't want to ask just about the nerd stuff. I wanted to unpack more of the stuff, but I told you that like that's not my thing. It's not my area of expertise.
Yes,
but I wanted to ask questions anyway because it is interesting and important. And yeah, I had a few other things I wanted to cover here before I let you go. I was curious because you were on stage, you've done voiceovers, you've done TV. If you were if you were ever in like SAG-AFTRA or any of the other unions, and then what your reaction to, or if you had any opinions on the recent like SAG-AFTRA strikes. They were a big topic in video games because there was a lot of video game actors that were involved with that. And then also these are broad topics, so I apologize, but like that's AI's okay. Incursion.
Oh my God. Yes. Yes.
Because that's big in video games as well. How AI is implemented, what it does with sort of the creative processes and stuff like that. So broad topics. What are your thoughts? I'm sorry, I don't have anything more precise than that, but I was just curious.
Well, I am I've been since 1977 a member of Actors Equity Association, SAG-AFTRA. It used to be SAG and AFTRA, and now it's SAG-AFTRA. I've always been, and Seattle was very much a union town. Coming to Virginia is kind of weird because Virginia is a right to work state. So they do things very differently here. I was very shocked and, kind of off my game coming here because they don't have to. If it's not a union thing, they don't have to pay union wages, and so that was kind of weird. I fully support the union, and I vote. I've always voted. And these, this AI situation, because we're still navigating those waters. That's true. I'm feeling some feelings around that with regard to academia, even because I know that people, what is it called? Something chat.
Chat GPT.
Chat GPT, yes. I know that students are using that, right? And so, it just it's like, can you? Oh, thank you. That's my granddaughter. So, I know. To me, it's like it's really threatening. It's really threatening the creator, the creative.
Mm-hmm.
Person, the creative artist, we cannot allow that to happen. We cannot allow the capture, I can't allow the capture of my voice to then be replicated without being compensated for that. And I knew that when they started, what are those things, those like self-checkout things in the store?
Yeah.
I knew when they started those, that was going to be like, I intentionally would go to a checker because it's like, if we all start doing this, they're going to eliminate these jobs over here. And pretty soon it's going to be, and that's exactly what has happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I just feel like that's the road we're on. You remember, what is it? Space Odyssey.
2001, yeah.
when the computer takes over. Like, the things, I'm telling you, like the things in George Orwell's 1984, the things they've started to happen. Like, I grew up with the Jetsons, right? Where they talked to each other, like they had a screen that they talked to each other. That's how they had phone calls. There were these assembly lines of food, everything was robotic. And now all of those things are true. They have happened. They are happening. Now we've got cars that drive themselves. And, really, it's like, how far are we gonna go? To me, it's problematic. That's why sometimes I make my students, rather than using their cell phone, because it feels like a part of their appendage. It feels like it's like actually bound to them. I tell them I don't want to see this is an acting class. I do not want to see anyone reading from a cell phone their script. I want you to have paper in your hand. I want you to, when you take a note, I want you to have a pen or a pencil. And I don't want you to write it on your computer. There is something about that it connects viscerally to the rest of you. Not only your mind, but your body and your soul and your spirit. And I want you to be a whole human being. And so I just feel like we're going to have to fight to hold on to our own humanity with this AI stuff, really.
Would you be so recently there was a company, I think their name was Replica, and they signed I forget how exactly it went down. They signed I think it was like a contract with SAG-AFTRA where actors could have their voices replicated, but it was done under the same you would be paid
Contract?
for it. Yeah, so it's like you would be going to work. They would be using your voice, but it would be replicas of your voice, if that makes sense. So
Yes,
you wouldn't actually go to the voiceover. Your voice would be replicated, I assume, by AI, and I assume you'd be paid the same way. Is that something you would be comfortable with, or do you want to physically, if you're asked to perform somewhere, do you want to physically be there? It's going to be you.
To me, I don't want, like, I know that they replicate my voice already, right? I mean, these games and whatnot. I mean, however, I created the role, I created
Sure.
that in the first place. Um, I would not be comfortable with them like these political commercials that they had on. Just they replicated Joe Biden, for example, and had him saying things that he wouldn't have been saying. Like Joe Biden would not have said that, right? That's what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid of people putting words in my mouth, taking my voice. And there's a reason that they want my voice. Like there was a reason that they want Joe Biden because he represents something, the ability to persuade a particular part of our population. So if you want to persuade that part of the population, use that voice, but say the things that you want,
Sure.
that you want them to hear. That's what I'm afraid of. That's what I'm afraid of. So I'm not, I'm going to allow the people who are like at the table, wordsmithing and, fixing the language around how we're going to deal as a union, as artists, writers and musicians and everybody. How are we going to deal? Because they do it with music too. They do it, like, how are we going to deal with that going forward? um there's gonna have to be some it's gonna have to be some controls put on that. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's all the questions I have for you. We covered a lot of topics. We went a lot of
Sure did.
places. But I appreciate you sitting down and navigating all that and dealing with broad, what do you think of this? And giving it your
Yeah.
best shot at an answer. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Is there anything you wanted
Thank
to
you.
say before we get out of here? Is there?
I do want to say this, that because you said has the work of the
Oh,
Conciliation
sure.
Project, for example, has it worked? Has it, what's been happening? And I can say to you that there are people who began it in 2001 who are still doing it, now. And that um, a couple of years ago, we took the first piece, Uncle Tom Deconstructed, we took a portion of that to a festival in New York. So it was an off-Broadway festival. And in the audience were like 10 generations of Uncle Tom Deconstructed, of
Oh,
people who had
wow.
done
Okay.
that show
Yeah.
with the Conciliation Project, over 10 generations. It was amazing. It was amazing. So I know that the work works. I know that there are people carrying on the work, and that we call on people who are part of the Conciliation Project from all over the country, when we come together to do a job. So I just, I believe in the work. I believe it'll be here when I'm not. So that's how much I know that the work works.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much again. I really appreciate it. Uh, and yeah, thanks for
Thanks
taking
for
the
reaching
time.
out. Thanks for reaching out. Yeah. It was fun.